No, not separated at all. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Don't get me wrong, Jim Carrey is a...
People once thought Jim Carrey was having a breakdown. When the Hollywood comedy legend stood on the red carpet at New York Fashion Week and declared that none of us truly matters, the internet exploded with confusion and debate. But the shocking moment wasn't random. It was part of a message he had been building for decades. Now at 64, the star of The Mask is finally explaining what he meant all along. So what truth has Jim Carrey been hinting at for years? And why did so many people completely miss it? Join us as we uncover what Jim Carrey finally reveals. The kid who used comedy as a survival tool. Before any of the philosophy, the ego dissolution, and the transcendental meditation, there was a child in Newmarket, Ontario, who, sometime around the age of 7, while trying to cheer up his bedridden mother, discovered that he could change the room by making people laugh. Jim Carrey was the youngest of 4 children of Percy Carey, a saxophonist who had set aside music for a safe job as an accountant, and Kathleen, a homemaker who struggled with chronic health problems. He was practicing impressions in the mirror by the time he was 8. He mailed his resume to the Carol Burnett Show at 10. He had already figured out that the face in the mirror could be rearranged into something that made other people feel better, and that this rearrangement was more powerful than anything else he had to offer. The family's stability collapsed when Percy lost his accounting job, the safe choice he had made instead of the comedy career he might have had. And what followed was a period that Carrey has returned to in interviews across 4 decades, because it is the foundation of everything he has since said about fear, performance, and identity. The family eventually lost their home and lived in a Volkswagen van, with teenage Carrey and his brother spending months in a tent in Charles Daly Park on the Lake Ontario shore. Carrey dropped out of school at 15 to work as a janitor at a tire factory to help support the family, 8-hour shifts from 6 in the evening into the next morning. The comedy routine was the thing he carried with him through all of it. It was also the thing he did not yet understand that was saving him in ways he would only be able to articulate 30 years later. He was doing stand-up in Toronto clubs by the late 1970s, got booed off the stage at his first performance at Yuck Yucks, came back and kept coming back, because the thing he had figured out in the mirror at age 8, that the face could be rearranged into something that made other people feel something, was not going to stop being true just because one room rejected it. He opened for Rodney Dangerfield and Buddy Hackett by 1979 and moved to Los Angeles in 1981 to try to break into the entertainment industry. He spent years hustling, doing impressions at the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard before landing a supporting role in the Fox sketch comedy series In Living Color in 1990. And then 1994 happened all at once. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber, all released within months of each other, and Jim Carrey became the biggest comedy star on the planet and the first comic actor to receive an upfront $20 million salary for a single film. He was the thing he had wanted to be. And then the question started. So what happens when you get everything you were running toward, and the running was the thing keeping you together? The confession that changed everything. The moment most people point to as the first time Carrey broke the fourth wall on his own celebrity was the 2004 interview with 60 Minutes, in which he sat down and said, without comedy, without deflection, that he had been on Prozac for a long time. He described his experience with depression as feeling like a low level of despair, peaks and valleys both smoothed out, everything just okay, able to smile at the office, but nothing genuinely resolved. The medication had blunted the pain, but it had also blunted the signal. He eventually stopped taking it, because his view, expressed later on Larry King Live, was that staying on antidepressants indefinitely meant you never got to see what the actual problem was. everything remained okay, and okay was not the same as fixed. What replaced Prozac was a complete overhaul of how he lived and how he thought about himself. He eliminated alcohol and caffeine, took up transcendental meditation, the same practice he described to graduates at Maharishi University, as allowing you to separate who you truly are from the stories that run through your head. He got deeply involved in Buddhist philosophy, which does not treat the ego as something to be protected, but as something to be seen through. He started painting, first as a way to heal what he described in a 2014 short documentary called I Needed Color as a Broken Heart, then as an obsession that took over his studio in Brentwood to a degree that his friend Jerry Seinfeld, who brought him to the studio for an episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, described as overwhelming. Carrey says he can see his inner life in the darkness of some paintings and what he wants from the brightness of others, that something inside you is always telling a story. The Depression Confession in 2004 was widely covered as a celebrity mental health story. What it actually was, in the context of everything that came later, was the first public chapter of a much longer account of a man systematically dismantling the identity that fame had built around him and trying to figure out what, if anything, was underneath it. The painting, the meditation, the spirituality he kept referencing in interviews, none of it was a quirky celebrity hobby. It was a reconstruction project. He was taking apart something that had been assembled from the outside and trying to locate a version of himself that could function without the audience. So what happened when he finally stood in front of an audience, not a movie audience, not a TV audience, but a room full of young people about to walk into the world, and said all of it out loud for the first time? The speech that named the fear. In May 2014, Jim Carrey delivered the commencement address at Maharishi University of Management in Fairfield, Iowa, a school that practices consciousness-based education centered on transcendental meditation, and gave what became one of the most watched commencement speeches in Internet history. Over 30 million people have since viewed some version of it online. The reason it spread the way it did is that it was not a graduation speech, but a confession. He told the story of his father, Percy, the musician who took the safe job as an accountant, got fired from it when Carrey was 12 and left the family to survive by whatever means they could. The lesson Carrey drew from his father's life was that you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love. The reason this line hit so hard for millions of people is that it reframes the standard fear of failure argument entirely. The safety of the safe choice is an illusion. Percy Carrey chose the safe path and still lost everything. The risk was always there. The only question was whether the thing you risked everything for was the thing you actually wanted. He told the graduates that fear will be a player in their lives, but they get to decide how much. That so many people choose their path out of fear disguised as practicality. That the ego tries to keep people trapped in the multiplex of the mind. That their eyes are not just viewers, they are projectors running a second story over everything you see. And the working title is, I'll Never Be Enough. And then, at the end, after all of it, he said, the two choices they will ever have are love and fear. And you should choose love. And you should never let fear turn you against your playful heart. The internet described this speech as inspiring. What it was, more precisely, was the work of a man who had spent 30 years in front of cameras playing characters and had arrived at a conclusion about what playing characters costs and what it reveals if you go deep enough into the performance. So what does going deep enough into a character actually reveal? He answered that question 3 years later, on a red carpet, to someone who was not expecting the answer. The red carpet that broke the internet. On September 9, 2017, at Harper's Bazaar Icons Party at the Plaza Hotel during New York Fashion Week, E! News reporter Kat Sadler pulled Jim Carrey aside for what she expected to be a standard red carpet interview. Carrey instead circled her, stared at her directly, and began by announcing that there is no meaning to any of this, that he came to find the most meaningless thing he could join, and that he is there. When she noted that he had dressed up for the occasion, he said he had not. There is no him. There are just things happening. When she asked about icons, he said that celebrating icons is the absolute lowest possible aim imaginable. When she asked what he made of the state of the world, he said, "It is not our world, we don't matter, and there is the good news." And then he walks off. The clip was retweeted 42,000 times in 9 days. Some people were concerned. His ex-girlfriend, Catriona White, had died of an overdose in 2015, and at the time of the interview, he was still in the middle of a wrongful death lawsuit brought by her estranged husband and her mother, a lawsuit in which Carrey had been accused of providing prescription drugs obtained under a false name and had countersued, alleging extortion. The suits were eventually dismissed in January 2018. The red carpet interview arrived in the middle of all of that, which is part of why the concern about his mental state was so immediate. But 2 days later, at the Toronto International Film Festival, speaking to The Wrap about the Netflix documentary Jim and Andy, which examined the lengths he went to in order to play comedian Andy Kaufman in Man on the Moon, refusing to break character for the entire production, Carrey explained exactly what he had meant. As an actor, you play characters, and if you go deep enough into those characters, you realize your own character is pretty thin to begin with. You have a separation and go, who is Jim Carrey? And the answer is that he doesn't exist. There is just a relative manifestation of consciousness appearing, and someone gave it a name, and a religion, and a nationality, and clustered those together into something that is supposed to be a personality. And it doesn't actually exist. He said he believed he got famous, so he could let go of fame. He said he is no longer part of it. Dressing happens, doing hair happens, interviewing happens, but it happens without him. This was not a breakdown. It was the logical endpoint of everything the 2004 Depression Confession and the 2014 Maharishi speech had been building toward. The man who had made a career out of performing characters had gone deep enough into the performance to look behind the set decoration and find that the thing called Jim Carrey was another character, no different from Ace Ventura or Andy Kaufman, assembled from a name, a set of behaviors, a body of work, and a story the world had agreed to tell about him. So what does a person do with that realization? And what did Carrey do next? The exit, the return, and the power rest. In April 2022, promoting Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on Access Hollywood, Carrey announced that he was considering retirement. He said he liked his quiet life. He liked putting paint on canvas. He loved his spiritual life. And then he said the line that became instantly quotable. The thing you might never hear another celebrity say, as long as time exists, that he had enough, he had done enough, he was enough. He said he would return if angels brought him a script written in gold ink. The internet treated this as another enigmatic Carrey moment, half joke and half philosophy. Impossible to read as entirely either. The production company behind Sonic the Hedgehog 3 responded by physically printing a copy of the script in 24-karat gold ink and delivering it to him. He came back.
Last night, you actually said that you returned to Robotnik for that sweet Sonic paycheck. How much money would it take to convince you to play Stanley Ipkiss again?
He later told an Associated Press reporter at the Sonic 3 premiere that he needed the money, frankly, then clarified in December 2024 interviews that what he had really meant was that he planned to power rest rather than fully retire, and that he was open to continuing with the Sonic franchise. The gold ink script and the money joke are both true. They are not contradictions. A man who has concluded that Jim Carrey's identity is a construct can still show up and play Dr. Robotnik, because playing a character is what he has always understood. The character is not the problem. Believing the character is real is the problem. He is set to reprise his role in How the Grinch Saved Christmas, scheduled for release in 2026. He continues to paint at his Brentwood studio, which visitors have described as stacked floor-to-ceiling with canvases, portraits, abstracts, religious imagery, dark and bright in equal measure. The work is not decorative. It is the project he has described as replacing the performance instinct with something quieter, more direct, and answerable only to himself. He has said in interviews that he can tell what he loves by the color of the paintings and what he wants from the brightness. This is not the language of a man who is idling. It is the language of a man who has found a different kind of output, one that does not require a ticket price or an audience rating or a $20 million upfront guarantee. And what does all of it add up to? What is the thing Jim Carrey has been saying across 64 years and several dozen films and 2 decades of interviews that most people heard as a punchline or a breakdown or a retirement announcement, but that is actually one continuous argument? What he has been saying all along. The through line is not hard to find once you look for it. The child in Newmarket who discovered he could change the room by rearranging his face grew up to be the most face-rearranging comedian in Hollywood history and spent 3 decades discovering that the room changes back when the performance ends. The question that chases that realization is the one he has been answering in public, at different levels of coherence and volume, since at least 2004. If the performer is not the same as the person, and the person is also a kind of performance, then what is actually there? The argument is this: the character you perform for the world will cost you everything if you mistake it for who you are. Percy Carey played the role of the responsible accountant and lost his job and his home. Jim Carrey played the role of the $20 million comedy star and spent 20 years fighting through depression, lawsuits, relationships that could not survive the performance, and a creeping sense that everything he had accumulated was rotating around an absence. The Prozac smoothed out the signal. The transcendental meditation started returning it. The painting stopped requiring an audience. And the NYFW red carpet interview, the Maharishi speech, the 60 Minutes confession, all of it is the same message delivered at different volumes. The ego is a script. Fear wrote most of the lines, and the working title is I'll Never Be Enough. He described depression, in one of his most circulated interviews, not as a condition, but as a message, his body saying it did not want to be this character anymore, that the avatar was too much, that what was needed was not medication, but deep rest from the performance. Whether or not that framing is clinically accurate is a separate question from whether it is personally true for him. It is clearly true for him personally. It has been personally true for him since at least 2004, and probably since the tent in Charles Daly Park and the 8-hour shifts at the tire factory when he was 15 years old, and the comedy routine was the only lever he had to pull. What he suspected, and what he has spent the last 20-plus years saying in graduation speeches and red carpet rants and quiet interviews about painting and spiritual life, is that the thing everyone was applauding was not him. It was a very good performance by him. And once you can see the difference between the two, everything changes. That is what he has been saying all along, at 40, 52, 55, 62, and now 64. It was never a breakdown. It was always the same argument, getting clearer. The Maharishi University speech has been watched over 30 million times. The NYFW red carpet clip was retweeted tens of thousands of times within days. The 60 Minutes interview is still cited in mental health discussions 2 decades after it aired. None of those moments were accidents or one-offs. They were installments in a continuous public reckoning by a man who had built the biggest possible version of the character named Jim Carrey, and then spent the rest of his career arguing with increasing directness that the character had been the problem all along. So was Jim Carrey simply going through a phase the world misunderstood? Or has he been trying to tell us something deeper about fame, identity, and the roles we all play? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.